All right, everyone, welcome to season five. And it's actually the last episode of season five, Hot Takes. And I am joined by Leah Avery. I can never remember if it's joined by, joined with, the grammar of it. But today, Leah Avery is joining me on the podcast, and we are going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is the mental side of running. But before we dive into that, I want to give you, Leah, an opportunity to introduce yourself to us. And I usually like to say, can you tell us a little bit about your running story? And then also, what is your relationship with running right now?
Love this. Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Leah. I am a physical therapist and I'm also a running coach. I do strength training and I have been running for a long time. Before I was a runner, I was a competitive swimmer. I did that from like the age of 8 to the age of 21, my senior year of college. So I've been doing some kind of sport activity since a very, very young age. But yes, I'm a marathoner. I say this lightly because I don't want anybody to think that they have to run a marathon to be a runner, but the marathon is my favorite distance. It always has been. It probably always will be. But yeah, PT running coach and so where I'm at with my running right now, I typically like to run a marathon a year. That's really what I like to do. I took a year off in 2020, obviously, like we all did because of COVID. And then I had a baby in 2019, so I didn't run one then either. But I am running one in December, the CIM marathon. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Are you officially training for CIM? Has training start like
Yeah, so
official training for it?
yeah, it had. So we're like, I want to say 18 weeks out, which typically this is like a big milestone for me that the 20 weeks came and I didn't really even know it. So
Mhm.
that's a good thing because a lot of times this is definitely something we can dive into, but was very caught up in the numbers and just like very rigid with the training. And I kind of looked at the calendar one day and said, "Oh, I think we're 20 weeks out from CIM." Didn't even know it, so that's okay.
I think that's always so nice because a marathon, I don't think people understand how long and how short a marathon training block can feel, right?
Yes.
Like you
Yes.
see 20 weeks and it seems like a long time, but
Mhm.
then when you're living it, it's kind of a really short time, but then it's not. So, like, I feel like the training block for a marathon, it plays, I don't know, at least for me, it's like mental tricks. Like, I'm still in denial. I'm running Chicago and
Mhm.
I'm still in denial that it's 10 weeks away. Right? Like, I don't know what you're talking about because if we honestly break that down, that's like, okay, I have 7 more weeks of real intense training and then a 3 week taper. And not to say that the taper won't have its own intensity associated with it, but I'm like, are you telling me that I still need to build miles for the next 7 weeks? Like, when is that going to happen? And then I know it's going to go in a blink of an eye. So it really does mess with you mentally, which I think is so perfect for this conversation because I find, and kind of like going into this marathon distance in specific, just to kind of pick at that thread, where in my experience, at least in the beginning, I was so focused on the miles and like, oh, I need to hit my miles. I need to hit the miles and I need to get to that, the 20
The
miler.
20, the 20, yes.
What I didn't realize is that there was a whole mental roller coaster that I also had to ride
Hmm.
as part of training for a marathon. And I'm curious if from when you started running to now, how has your opinion of mentally prepping for a marathon changed?
Yes, yes, I love that question. And it's that feeling of it's so much and it's so short at the same time is very real. But I think the biggest thing we have to take away is that it doesn't ever have to go perfectly. And that is so, and I truly believe that most all runners are type A in some way, shape, or form. And that is why we got into running because we love these numbers. We love to check a box. You know, the box checking is so important to us. But yes, the getting caught up in the mileage is a big one. And I have a lot of people that will come to me, they say, I'm going to do my first marathon, which I love. I think the first one is the best one because you just really don't know what you're doing, and that's almost better. But they're just are always like, "Am I running enough? Am I running enough? Am I going to be have enough mileage under my belt? And why am I only going to 20 miles?" That's a big
Hmm.
question too. But yeah, I think you have to remember that your training is cumulative. And so we think like, hey, if this X run doesn't go great, then that means all of the other ones are erased. And it just does not mean that. Typically, a bad run is a fluke, but a good run is not a fluke. You can't fake fitness, you know. But yeah, just letting go of checking the box is so important. It doesn't mean that the box can't get checked, but sometimes it just gets checked in a different day or a different order in a different way. It doesn't mean that it has to go unchecked. And letting go of that is so huge.
Yeah, you said miles and paces are just data in
Oh,
one of your posts. And I loved that because I'm always trying to tell people like don't um that I think the conversation I like to have with people is that being consistent with your training is more important than how many miles you're running or how fast you're running it. And people really struggle with that because we are surrounded by, and I feel like it's getting better. I feel like I'm not seeing as much content from people that are like, oh, you have to be high mileage and you have to do all the speed workouts and you have to run this pace and you have to do it this way. I feel like I'm not seeing as much of that. And maybe it's because I'm just seeing a lot of other things right now. But I really love that you posted that. And I was wondering if you can expand a little bit more on yes, these are pieces of data, which to what you said are important, but why shouldn't they be the entirety of
yeah.
our focus?
Yeah, they simply are just data. And this goes back to like, you know, zone two running is still kind of a big
Hmm.
thing. And that's fine. Easy running is important. But the best thing to remember with easy running is that easy running is an effort, not a pace. You know, so that doesn't mean that your easy pace is going to be the same every single day. You know, just like your miles are not going to be the same every single day. And like you said, showing up being consistent is so much more important than being perfect. And I have said this before too. The best way to be consistent is to stop trying to be perfect. And that's, you know, that right there, whenever I was able to really let that go was when so many doors opened for me as far as the way I was running, how much I was enjoying it. But yes, just letting go of the perfection is really the best way to be consistent. And like you said, being consistent is really how you're able to get that good, healthy build to whatever race it is. It doesn't have to be the marathon. It can be half marathon, 10K, 5K. You know, you just have to have that consistency under your belt. But the consistency doesn't mean that you have to run every single day or get all of your runs in every week. It just means that you continue to show up in the best way that you can on that given week, on that given day. But
Yeah, I always find the idea of perfection to be such an interesting one because I feel like we can go down different categories, right? Of like, oh, if I don't follow my plan to perfection, I am a failure.
mm,
I am doing something wrong, right? Either like internalize that there's something wrong with you, or I feel like you have people who, when they don't follow the plan to perfection, they just drop off. Like they stop trying and they stop showing up. And I'm like, no, like and I try to talk to my athletes all the time. And I know this is something that's important to you, right? Where I see my athletes, they're not just runners, like they are whole humans that are trying to live life during very complicated times. And sometimes running it takes a back seat, and I tell my athletes all this all the time. I'm like, it's an equation, right? If running does not add to your life, whether it's adding joy, adding, an opportunity to discover something about yourself, or adding hope, whatever it is, if it's not adding to your life, then we need to subtract it from your life. And we need to figure out, where do we pull back so that it is making sense? So, with that said, I'm curious if you yourself were ever a perfectionist, and what did perfectionism, I don't even know if that's a real word, but what did that look like for you? And how did you, I don't want to say come to terms with it, but how did you start to reframe that for yourself? Because when I think of being a perfectionist, I feel like, and you can tell me your thoughts here, but whenever I think of perfectionist, I think of something like having power over me. Whereas when I let go of those perfectionist tendencies, I feel more empowered. So I'm
Yes.
kind of curious your relationship with perfectionism, whatever the word is.
Yes, no, I mean, yes, the question if I'm a perfectionist is laughable because I was such a perfectionist. And that really came from such a young age of starting in competitive sports when I was so young. And there was no pressure from my parents or anything like that. It was all kind of like internal. And I truly think that my perfectionism came from me wanting to earn my value through my sport. And so I wanted to be perfect at everything I did so that I could feel more valuable. But I'm very open about this in that I wanted things to go so perfectly and I always wanted to do well that it really led me down a path of having come to the point of having panic attacks when I would do marathons because if I didn't feel like the run was going perfectly, if things didn't feel great from the get-go, or like it started to get hard at mile 8, I would completely fall apart because I was so afraid that I wasn't going to do well. And if I didn't do well, that meant I was a terrible person and I've wasted all this money and the training was a waste. And, we just go down this huge spiral of thinking that if it's not perfect, then we're not perfect or we're not valuable. And this goes back to that, what I said about, your pace and your miles are just data. It's the same thing. Those things are just data. They don't give you value. Your value isn't measured by the pace or the miles that you run. It has to do with, who you are and showing up in the way that's best for you. And I think, like you said, understanding that yes, we're runners, but we're also a person. And we all have a stress threshold, and running is a stressor. So, whether it be good or bad, our body views it as stressful. So if your life is crazy and your stress is here and you try to add a run on top of it, like this is me putting my PT hat on, you are setting yourself up for a recipe for some kind of injury, flare up, something like that. And so that's something to really keep into consideration. And the more you try to be perfect, usually the more you're going to lead yourself down a road of injury, burnout, and really just losing the joy. And at the end of the day, it's not that serious. And we do it because we love it. When people say it's not that serious, it can be irritating, because it is serious to us. It is, but it doesn't determine our value. And that's my biggest thing to everyone is that even if you don't run the way you think you should, it has nothing to do with you as a person. And sometimes you can do everything right and still have a terrible race day, and that's okay. That is
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And I think of those, I always try to point out to people, right? Like, you can have a perfect training cycle and
Yes.
have a really bad race day. Just like
Yes.
you can have a really ugly training cycle
Yeah.
and then have a great race day, because there's so much at play, right? We're not like we're just scratching the surface here when we say, oh, it's like your nutrition and your training and your gear and all of that. And it's like there's so much else that goes into it that, again, I think when you look at a race and you're thinking about your training cycle, excuse me, I have to cough. Hold on. That's awful. Y'all, this cold is awful. But I find that it's like when you're looking at the race, all you're seeing are, oh, here are the miles I have to run. And I feel like you don't really see who is it that I have to become so that I can run those miles. So how do you have that conversation with your, oh my, that is awful.
I'm so sorry.
Oh my gosh. I hope that's out of my system. Now you're going to see me coughing like crazy.
It is okay.
Wow. So the question I'm trying to ask
Yes, I'll take over for you.
is how do you have this conversation with your athletes in terms of, wow.
Totally okay.
So how do you have this conversation with your athletes in terms of like getting them to see that it's not just the miles and it's
Yeah.
not just doing the workouts. Like you have to become the person who believes in themselves to
Yes.
do that work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really just, like I said, comes down to something that I really like to ask my runners is they say like, well, I'm really nervous for this race, or I'm afraid of this distance, or this, I'm just so nervous for race day. And I say, why are you nervous? And they'll say, well, I'm just afraid that I'm not going to do well. But why does that scare you? Like, yes, it can be disappointing, but it shouldn't scare you. And just kind of like letting go of that sense of urgency and this sense that I have to do X, Y, and Z in order to do well is so freeing for a runner because they just kind of believe that the paces define them and they really do. And even though we all like try to get away from that, a lot of us, if I said, hey, don't run with a watch, they would say, oh no, absolutely, I cannot do that. And watchless runs, I mean, we love to have the record of it. So like, I get it. But yeah, just kind of understanding where the fear is coming from, where the pressure is coming from, and why they're putting that on themselves makes such a difference in just kind of understanding where that's coming from. And it looks different for every single person. Like I talked about that sense of urgency, that was something huge for me that I really had to let go of. Like if I was in a race, the thought of stopping to say hi to a family member or stopping at an aid station was just not even an option for me. But that was creating so much fear and sense of like I could not stop at any cost. That was creating so much buildup and anxiety in me that it was kind of ruining my races. So just kind of letting go of those things of thinking it has to go perfectly. It goes back to that perfectionism that a race doesn't have to go perfectly for it to go well or for you to be proud of it. It can even not go well and you can still be proud of it and like learning how to do that. And I think again, that goes back to the perfectionism is I'm not going to be proud unless I do this perfectly. And that's not the case.
Okay, I have like a kind of like a devil's advocate kind of question here
Yeah,
for
I
you.
love that.
So, because I find that I love social media. Like, I think it's great because it really does. It helps connect me with people, just like it's connected me with you. But what do you think about this? I don't want to say it's messaging, but just this idea that if you're stopping, you're not a real runner.
Yeah.
If you're taking pictures in a race, you're not a real runner. If you're not focused on finishing the race, you're not a real runner. Because I find that that's also part of what kind of mucks up our mental state of
Mhm.
being a real runner means running has to look this way. Couple that with like these perfectionist tendencies. How do we work around that?
Yeah, I agree with you that I love social media. I've connected to so many people. It's wonderful, but you have to use it with caution because you do see people doing, like you said, they say don't pause on your runs, which first of all, it's summer, so pause. Like for your own safety, pause. But yeah, the thing is that there's no definition of a real runner. There is no definition. If you run, then you are a runner. And I'm not sure where this like term came from that you have to do X, Y, and Z in order to be a runner. If you run, even if you don't run races, but running is part of your regular activity, I'm not meaning you have to run 5 days a week, but if it's something that you do and it's okay to have seasons in it, all of those things. Like the year I was big, I did not run a single step when I was pregnant. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as your doctor clears it, I think it's great. But for me, I just didn't want to. And I was pregnant in the summer and I live in the South, so just no. But in that year that I didn't run, I really struggled and it was like, well, I'm not really a runner right now. No, no. I was a runner before. I was a runner during my pregnancy, and I was a runner after it. There makes no difference. But yeah, just seeing the things that we see on social media, like we love to see the running, we love to see the races, but at the same time, you have to realize that there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And if someone is bothering you by what they're posting, you can either unfollow it or just realize that there's more going on than you realize. And it's okay to post paces if that's something that you want to do or you see someone that does it, but don't compare that because even though they may have shared their entire story, you just don't know their whole story. They may have ran cross country in high school, they may have ran in college, they may have done all these things, and you just started running. And that's okay. And some people pick it up faster than others, and that's okay too. But just realizing that there's no one definition that defines a runner, it's simply if you run, you are a runner, period. There's no I have to do races, I have to do a marathon, I have to run a certain pace or distance. It just doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. And I also want to say one more thing that you don't have to be a certain speed or you have to run a certain distance to deserve to do things for your running. I know a lot
Mm.
of people say, oh, I'm too slow to need a coach. I'm too slow to strength train. First of all, I don't even believe in the word slow. I think there's just varying paces of running. But you're never too anything to deserve to get help with your running or support it or invest in yourself. Like that's what it's about.
Yeah, I think I mean, it ties into, again, like the topic of this episode where it's like the mental side of running, right? Like what you're saying, we're talking about the physical aspect of running, but being a runner, I always tell people that being a runner means also, do you think about running? Do you think about how you can eat to support your running? Do you think about how you can sleep to support your running? All of that makes you a runner. Oh my God, this cough.
Yes, I'll chat a little bit. Yeah, it really does. I mean, there's no, like I said, there's no X, Y, and Z that makes you a better runner or makes you considered a better runner than someone else. It's really just about if you love it and why you're doing it. And your why is really a big thing to kind of look at.
This has never happened to me on the podcast. So, thanks for being here. I was
Yeah.
telling you that I'm like a week into this cold and I'm like, yeah, I should be better. Like it's okay. And no, it's like this cough has decided to come out because it's like, ooh, you're talking to another adult. Like, wow. So
Yes. It's that time I've heard a lot of people are getting sick right now, which is like, oh great, we'll just ramp it up and then send everybody to school and then it'll be even worse.
which makes sense because I feel like anytime my kids start school, they always come home with something. So I'm like,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So if we're already going into it
Oh yeah.
a little bit of a weakened immune system, then it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense that that's
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for for
Yeah.
letting me have my cough attacks. Anybody watches this, they're just going to see me trying to hack out a lung. Um,
We've all been there.
we've all been there. Have we been there though on a video when you're trying to have a conversation? I don't know, but the cough drops, hopefully they will help.
Yep.
Um, so this is just great. So I think oh God, there was something you said that I wanted to kind of circle back to. And it's kind of going back to what you were initially saying about perfectionism, that when you were talking, it made me realize that approaching running with like this perfectionist mentality, which again, right, we're talking about the physical act of running, but your mental state is that of perfection. When you do that, you don't give yourself the opportunity to pivot when things, much to your example, don't go to plan. And I'll share, I know you've shared so beautifully on your Instagram account, like the different marathons you've done. And you coupled the times, like you shared your times, but then you also shared mentally kind of what was going on in your life. And I think back to my really bad marathon experience that I'm always like, that one was the worst. And I had during the race so much trouble pivoting and accepting where I was in order to finish in a way that I could be proud of. Like that was my experience in that race, which then led to me like 3 months afterwards moping about the race. I still continued to run and I still kind of kept up with training because at the heart of it, I love running. Not always, I don't always love the act of running, but at the heart of it, I loved running. But that is something that when I look back at that race experience, and I've since had other races that have not gone, gone to plan. And I always look back to that one, and there's a part of me that feels really sad because I think of how different could my experience have been had I just allowed myself to pivot away from the A goal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a huge one. And that goes back to what I talked about as far as having to be perfect and why, honestly, why a huge reason why I had those panic attacks. I was unable to pivot as well. And just the feeling of this isn't going well, and then you immediately start to spiral. When if you kind of sit back and realize, say, hey, this doesn't feel great at mile 7, that doesn't mean that the rest of it has to not feel great. Maybe you're not going to be on your A game, but that's okay. And just allowing yourself to continue to run it is huge, but I also think that it's okay to be sad and upset if a race doesn't go well. It's just a matter of how long is it going to impact you and how are you going to pivot from that. Yeah, like you said, I'm very open about my marathon journey in that, I ran my fastest one in 2018, had my son, and then I tried 5 more times for 7 years to try to go faster, and I did not. And there were some times where I went a full hour slower. I'm not talking about a few minutes, I'm talking about a full hour. And but those things helped me to be able to be in the place that I'm at now. And I know it stings when you're in those low places, but they really build your resiliency and your ability to just enjoy running more. And that's kind of what a lot of people forget. And what I had gotten away from is my goal wasn't to enjoy it anymore. It was just a number and I had to get it, and everything relied on me getting that number when in reality, nothing relied on me getting that number. Nothing at all. And it wasn't like my family wasn't going to be proud of me. I mean, I don't even think my own husband knows my PR. Like it doesn't matter, you know? Like those things don't matter. They matter to us. And I'm also not saying don't let it not matter to you because it does matter to us and this is important to us. But to the extent that it affects you in the way that it affects you is really what you have to look at.
I love what you said about your husband because that was like a big realization that I had,
Yeah.
in the beginning of my running journey, beginning to middle,
Yeah.
where I had to remind myself, like, who are the people that really matter to me?
Yeah.
And it's that small, like it's a small group of people. And it's like, so then why am I stressing out over these times? Why am I stressing out over how do I stack up or compare to other people who also did this race? And it's like, those people don't care about me. So why am I spending time caring about them? And it also just this focus on time. And I always say, like, now I say it, right? Where times are important because you need to know how to fuel, right? Like for me now, that's where it's switched, where I'm like, it's not so much about like the PR or any of that. It's about knowing how long am I going to be out there and then how much fuel do I need to take for that projected amount of time. Whereas before, I never thought that way. It was always like, okay, what's the time? And like, that's the time we're going for. Now it's like, okay, how much fuel do I need? Like if I am anticipating this time, then what's the fuel? But I remember thinking that, and and I'm sure you've had so many experiences too, where you talk to people and they're like, oh, so how much is that? How many miles is that distance? Like you'll say marathon and or half marathon, and they'll be like, how many miles is that? And they're more impressed by hearing that your body did that distance than by how quickly it was done. And I
Mhm.
find that the only people who really kind of but don't actually care are going to be other runners because they have an understanding of it. But
Yeah.
at least for me in my life, not to say that my friends aren't important or that the running community aren't important, but it's like the people whose opinion does matter. Those are people who don't care how quickly I move. They're just happy that I did it and survived, especially like for me with how much I complain about marathon training or running. It's more like, yeah, you got it done. So that took me a while to kind of sift and separate. And I'm curious if you had a similar experience with that.
Yes, yes, I definitely did, and a lot of that goes back to my swimming career because I swam on a club team and then I swam in college and it was a D1 college. So the pressure to perform is absolutely there. And the people who were above me definitely cared how fast I went. And swimming is a very different sport. It's a lot shorter and things like that. But those people cared. And so I think in my mind, I just carried that over into, okay, people care about how fast I go, and when I was young, again, I had no pressure from my parents, but I had this idea that, those kind of full-time sports are expensive. And so I felt this sense of like guilt. Okay, I
Mhm.
have to be fast because my parents have dedicated so much to this sport for me, so then it was like the same thing as I got older and I was an adult and we were married. I thought, oh my gosh, I have to run fast because this is costing us money, And that sounds silly, but it really is true. And I've had numerous athletes say to me, I don't think I can drop out of this race because I already paid for it. And I'm like, if you don't want to do this, you're going to pay the price 10 times over, and nobody's going to be mad at you or upset at you that you didn't do this race or you did this race slower than you wanted to. It's just, I think we make these things in our mind that people really care. And if you have someone that's breathing down your neck and saying you need to run faster, then you may need to separate from that person. Whatever that means, just don't be around them as much, but it goes back to it's not going to increase your value. Nobody's going to love you any less if you don't run a certain time at your next race. And letting go of that thought is huge. And really, social media, like we said, it can be a tough place. But honestly, if you really look and someone is real and raw and say, hey, I didn't have a good race, the amount of support And people saying, thank you for saying it didn't go well is huge because it feels good to know that other people have those normal experiences. We don't want to see other people fail, but knowing that we all have hard days is so important.
Yeah, and I think even from a like a training perspective, my personal experience and then just coaching people, right? Where you're training to be able to handle whatever gets thrown your way on race day, right? So like it took me a while after my disastrous marathon to accept the fact that my training was perfect. It was great. It gave me certain expectations going into the race, and then race day just did not come out that way. Race day did not reflect that. However, race day did reflect a strong training cycle because if my training cycle weren't effective, I would not have been able to finish the race in general. So that was like a big mental shift for me of, all right, yes, I am investing all this time in training. I am making all these sacrifices in my, family life, social life, like all these sacrifices in order to make this training possible. But the training doesn't guarantee any outcome. Like it really doesn't. And I feel like that's something that we're all failing ourselves if we think that the training is going to guarantee a specific outcome. Training is going to prime us maybe or like prepare us, but it doesn't guarantee anything. And I feel like that's a really harsh thing to say out loud, but I think it's the reality. Like it's again, from my experience, it's training has prepared me to handle whatever gets thrown at me race day. It has shown me that I am strong enough to finish, but also the more more years I spend in this sport, I realize that the other aspect of training is that training has given me the opportunity to work through a whole collection of mental tools that I can use when things are tough, just as I can use them when things are good. And again, it goes back to this idea that people focus so much on the miles and the workouts, but they don't pay much attention to, okay, what are the tools that we need to develop mentally in order to handle? I mean, something as simple as, like, how do we mentally accept the fact that we need to take a rest day?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we do. So I find it all just to again for me it's the more I become involved in this sport and the more I work with other people, I realize, oh, it's just such a disservice to everyone by not talking about the mental side of running, by not talking about the weight of our thoughts on our running. And I'm a big believer in the fact that like when we do have those stressors in life, that they are literally weighing us down. And if we try to run when when we're weighed down, that does affect us physically. And that does affect like our shoulders or, just how we carry ourselves. So it's all connected. And
Yeah.
yet we focus so much more on what's visible versus acknowledging the invisible.
Yes, absolutely. I think the biggest thing to remember at the end of the day that running is so much more than running to all of us. And that doesn't mean that it's defining us, but it really is so much more than just getting outside and running. It's connected to so many things that we do and just understanding that everything else that we do is also connected to our running just it's huge, it's huge. And there's nothing wrong with it meaning a lot to you. I think that there is some kind of things going around saying like it shouldn't mean, don't get so wrapped up in it. Yes, don't get wrapped up in it, but also understand that it does mean a lot to us, and unfortunately those hard races are hard. But when you do have the good one, honestly, I have noticed myself and other people as well, when you have the good ones, you immediately think about those bad ones or those hard ones and say, wow, like that was worth it because it got me to here, not because I did so poorly, but what I had to work through to get to this point. So the tough ones are just as much of an achievement in our entire career. Like when I look back, I'm going to look back at the hard ones, but I'm going to be really proud of them because they built me to who I am today. And so, just yeah, the marathon or any distance doesn't owe us anything. And we really have to remember that. And it's scary, but also I think part of the draw to why we do this a little bit because it's kind of that unknown and let's see what can happen. And, we like control over it, but at the same time, we like the thrill of just seeing what can happen at the same time in a weird way. We're all a little bit, but it's okay.
That is okay. And I think I love the concept of both and, right? Like two things can be true, even if they don't seem like they can be true at the same time. And what I'm hearing you say is that it can mean a lot to you, and you can still question what it does to your self-worth, right? Like those two things can exist. And I think questioning your relationship with running and how it makes you feel about yourself are things that are going to actually help you stay in the sport longer, because hopefully what it does, it helps create space between the performance. And I feel like you had a post about this, and I'm trying to remember which one it was, where it's like your outcome, your performance says nothing about who you are as a person. And you also, I think it's even in that same one, and I wrote it down because I wanted to make sure I asked you about it, because I found it to be so profound, that running faster won't change the way we view ourselves. And that is something that I feel like all runners kind of experience at some point, where like you think that once you start running faster, or once you're able to run with the quote unquote faster group, that somehow you're going to be different. And it's like, no, you're still going to be you. You're still going to be you. And here's the thing about numbers, and I always think of that, like I think of that Bob Marley quote. It has to do with money, but it's the same like with numbers, that you're always going to chase the next number. It's not like you're going to hit that PR. It's not like you're going to hit unlock this new pace range and then be satisfied there. There's going to be something in you that's going to drive you to strive for faster, whatever that is. So, can you just expand on that notion of how running faster, it's not going to change how you view yourself, and like what else should we be looking at or thinking about or focusing on instead of that?
Yeah, I think the quote I wrote was that yeah, running faster won't change the way you view yourself, but how you view yourself may actually change the way that you run. And so I think it really goes down to any kind of number that, like you said, none of us are going to feel actually better. That's what a lot of us are looking for. If I could just run faster, I might feel better about myself. I'll gain this confidence. I think it goes to, I don't like to talk about weight loss, but that's a very common thing too. People think if I get to X amount of weight, I'm going to feel better. And if I get this amount of money, I'm going to feel better. And it never comes to that. It's how you're viewing yourself and how that is going to impact what you are doing and not the other way around. It shouldn't be, I'm doing this, so I'm going to feel better. It should be, I'm going to feel better, so I can do this in a certain way or a better way that's going to benefit me more. It's going to benefit my family more. And yeah, thinking that a pace is going to change who you are is not a hamster wheel that you want to get on at all because I've been there. So many of us have been there. And the thing is if you have a bad race when you go home, nothing about you is going to change. If you have a good race when you go home, nothing about you is going to change. And having a child really brought that to my attention that my 5-year-old, when I had an amazing race, I came home and he was proud of me because my husband told him, whatever. But as soon as I walked in the door, he said, "Good job, mommy." And then we needed to play. Like it does not matter.
Mhm.
So nothing about you will change. And the time that you cross the finish line, it's not where the change is happening. It's the build that you're doing to get there is what is going to change about you. The journey that you go through to show up every day and do those things is what changes you, not the finish line. Not at all.
Yeah, and it's not, and I know we specifically talked about pace right now, but the same goes for distance, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
running the marathon, like Leah, like as you said in the beginning, you don't have to run a marathon. Like being a runner, you don't have to do any races at
Yeah.
all, right? And I think the same applies to the distances where I find that a lot of people feel like they have to run a marathon because that's the next thing, because that's what's expected of them. And it's like, no, you don't have to. Like, you actually don't have to do anything. Like, it really, you don't. And I find that, again, in my experience, the people who are thinking the marathon is the next step, I find that those people sometimes struggle a little bit more with the training because they haven't done some of that internal work of like figuring out like why do I really want to run this? Like what is it that I'm hoping to get out of this experience? And I always try, I always talk about like your why. Like what is your why for doing what you're doing? Because when it gets hard, you need to connect to that why to remember there's a greater reason for it. It's not just tackling the distance and finishing, but there's got to be something deeper to anchor you to it because it's going to get hard. Regardless of whether you're training for a 5K, 10K, or just looking to find consistency, there are going to be moments that feel really, really hard where you question why you're even doing what you're doing. And having that connection to why. Why is this goal important to me? Why do I want to do this? And it, again, like that's something that has nothing to do with what you're physically doing and everything to do with what's going on in your brain and with your thoughts. So it's to me, it's always so fascinating when people, and we're seeing it, right? Like there's a whole marathon boom of people signing up for these races. And I'm like, I wish everyone would just kind of take a moment to kind of step back and do some goal setting. I don't know, fill out a goal setting worksheet and figure out like what are the deeper meanings to this? Because if not, it's hard. Like it's hard. And something like a marathon to me is such a life changer. Like, and not life changer in like, yes, your life changes, but I mean, like, it requires such a change in lifestyle in order to make it possible that that's something you need to wrap your head around as well, where you can't, if you're used to going out to happy hour on Friday night, that might have to shift. And then what does that do for your sense of being in community with whoever you went out to happy hour? Like, those are those little things that obviously people don't think about. I think about it all the time where I'm like, so what needs to change in your life in order to make this happen? And
Yeah.
how do you need to change? So I think there's a lot. There's a lot there. I wanted to talk about real quick because you've mentioned this in your post, and it's again another aspect of the mental side of running is this idea of chasing your old self.
Yeah.
And what does that do for who you are now?
Yeah, yeah, that was a big one that I learned just, postpartum and the postpartum bounce back, which is not a thing. I hate that term. It's never about trying to get back to where you were. It's about moving forward. And I think a big thing that a lot of us have to remember, a lot of people start running like in their mid 20s or something. And what you needed then is going to be very different than what you needed now if you're in your mid 30s. But it's not even necessarily about the age, it's about your season of life looks different every single year. So the training that you may have needed last year, maybe you were doing higher mileage, but maybe now you have more stress at work, you have more stress at home. So you can't tolerate that, but that doesn't mean that you are going to be not as fast. It's going to be what you need right now. So trying to get back to where you were is never the answer. It's moving forward and meeting yourself where you're at right now. So getting back to where you were doesn't mean that you're going to be better. It means that you're just moving forward and you're not, or that you're not going to be better. You're just moving forward and finding what works for you in the season of life that you're in currently, because it's going to look different every single year. And I had to really let that go of the whole mileage game. And I was doing X miles, 7 years ago. Well, I also didn't have the same kind of life that I had 7 years ago, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that I can't get better doing technically less. It's just different. It's not less, it's different.
Yeah, and I know I struggle with the paces. Like that's something I struggle with a lot in terms of like just getting older and
Yeah.
finding that paces that I could do 10 years ago, they're a lot harder to get to right now. And I have to remind myself that if what I truly desire out of running is to be able to do it for as long as possible, then I have to accept that chasing that old version and trying to get back to her, it's actually taking me away from right now. One, and two, to your point, it's going to increase my chance of injury because that means I'm not going to train in a way that is safe or sustainable for what my body can do right now and for what life is demanding of me right now. Like, I cannot compare myself to who I was when I was in my, I'm 41 now, but like I can't compare myself to 31. That's a whole decade of just, life, wear and tear on this body. And the fact that I can still do, and I think it's even just listening to you where it's like, oh, the fact that you've been running a marathon a year consistently, I'm more impressed by that than your actual times because I'm like, wait, so you've been able to do that every year and not get injured, or even if you've gotten injured, you've been able to be well enough to start a training cycle to dedicate 20 weeks, 18 weeks, however long to do it again. And those are the things that I find that before I would dismiss. And now in this journey of trying to celebrate where I'm at right now, it's that, okay, can I look at those other forms of progress that are not directly tied to pace, that are not directly tied to my weekly mileage. And that's hard because it kind of goes counter to the in order to be productive or in order to be growing, you have to get faster. And it's like, but you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of the proudest moments I've had is even in like the last 2 years is that I skip a run or I move my runs around and it doesn't bother me. Like that is huge progress. And even when my own runners do that and they let a run go, I'm so proud because that is hard to do. And 9 times out of 10, we stress harder about skipping it than we do anything else. That's more stress on us than anything. And so just seeing those small improvements in how we're approaching running and letting running be healthy for us. It
Mm-hmm.
can be unhealthy in a way that it brings us down. And that can really happen. And I don't think we realize it. And because we think, running is a sport and an exercise, so it can't possibly be bad for us. I'm not saying that it's not good for us, but it can bring us down.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, my goal, and I think a lot yours too, and a lot of other people is longevity. I just love it. And I want to be able to go out and run 10 miles a week, even when I'm 70. It's part of what I do. It's part of what kind of grounds me and brings me joy. And so I want to do this forever. I don't want to care about the PR all the time. But at the same time, chasing those time goals are great. And I love that. It's just in the right context.
Yeah, and I think chasing those goals are sometimes they offer structure.
Yeah.
And when we need structure and when we need, I find that like when the world is chaotic, and perhaps running is that one place that you can turn to have a little more structure, to feel like you can be focused, or to feel like, hey, this is that one thing that I'm going to do just for me. It gives you that. All right. I have 4 questions. They're kind of like rapid fire-ish.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Love it. Love
and then
it.
and then
Maybe
and
you'll
then
wait and see.
we're done. So this one is probably not as rapid fire, but if you had to answer, how does our mind impact our running? How would you answer that?
Yeah, like you said, the more weight you have on you, the harder it is going to be run. So if you're putting a huge amount of pressure, a huge amount of weight into the paces and the miles, it's not going to feel good. It's not. It's not going to be joyful. And at the end of the day, that's why we're doing it.
Hmm. How do we connect with you further?
Oh yeah. So Instagram is actually the only via social media that I have. So my handle, I guess, is Leah, Leah, Leah.runs.dpt. Yeah.
Yeah. And for run coaching, it would be able to like connect with you through
Yes,
there.
there's like a link in my bio, as they say. But I work under Train Smart Run Strong, which is Vicky. Most everybody knows Vicky.
Yeah. What's coming up for you that you're really excited about? Can be running, doesn't have to be running related, but something that just makes you want to
Yeah.
jump for joy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's joyful. It's a little bit all the things. So my son just started kindergarten, which, oh my, he started yesterday. So if I start crying, forgive me. No, I'm better today. But it's a huge milestone for us. And I just posted about this yesterday, in that I was a full-time PT before I had him. I had all intentions of going back full-time. And then as soon as he was born, my husband and I looked at each other and we said, I'm staying home. So I stayed home with him for the last 5 years and have done this coaching on the side, really, but it's grown into more than that. And so him starting school is kind of like, let's see what we can do. And so I'm excited to just grow and see what happens for the both of us. It's kind of like we both have started a new chapter.
Yeah, let me tell you, those hours, those school hours are some of the most exciting, where you're like, what can I do with these hours? Like, what can I create? So I'm excited to see where that takes you, and even
Thank
just
you.
what, how you reorient the
Yeah.
things that are important to you with him being in school, and kind of like the mental space that also clears up for you, of not having to worry about him 24 hours. Now it's like you have this pocket of time
Yeah.
that's his time too. So,
Yeah.
all right. Final question is, what are your final words for us?
I think I say this all the time, and I already said it, but running is so much more than running. And it is okay if running is important to you. You just have to realize how that is affecting you. And at the end of the day, it can be the most important thing, but don't let it control everything.
Oof, not going to say anything else to that. Leah, thank you
But
so much for
yeah.
joining me. Everyone, we'll see you on the internets.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.